what does the memo actually say? Well, as it turns out, it's not primarily about Donald Trump or even about the broader Russia investigation. The memo is really the story of a semi-obscure Trump campaign volunteer called Carter Page, who back in 2016 was identified by the Obama administration as a secret agent of the Putin government. 4 times, FBI officials went to a federal surveillance court and argued they had probable cause to believe that Carter Page was working with Russian spies. He was an agent of a foreign government. 3 times, FBI Director Jim Comey personally signed off on this claim. Deputy Director Andrew McCabe and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein put their names to it as well. So why were all of these officials so certain that Page, who was a Naval Academy graduate who has no criminal record, was betraying his country? Because we now know they were relying on the Trump dossier. That's the still unverified opposition research dump paid for by the RNC and the Hillary campaign and compiled by a British spy called Christopher Steele. The Trump dossier made spying on Carter Page possible. How are we sure of that? Because Andrew McCabe of the FBI said so behind closed doors under oath to Congress just this past December. Now, Democrats are now furiously denying that in anonymous leaks to sympathetic reporters, but it's obviously true. In a minute, we'll talk to a member of Congress who was in the room when McCabe said it. But ask yourself, if the FBI had powerful additional evidence that Page was a Russian spy, why did they include the dossier in their request at all? Indeed, why did they lead with it? The Trump dossier allowed our government to spy on Carter Page. That is not a talking point, it is a fact. And given that it's a fact, it is remarkable to learn that the FBI knew at the time that the dossier was unreliable, to put it charitably. An independent FBI unit analyzed that document and found its claims, quote, only minimally corroborated. The FBI also knew that the dossier's author, Christopher Steele, was an inflamed partisan working on behalf of political operatives trying to win a presidential race, you'll remember. Steele actually told DOJ employee Bruce Orr that he was, quote, desperate that Donald Trump not get elected and was passionate about him not being president. So assessing all of this, no rational person could in good faith treat the Trump dossier as fact. And yet that is exactly how the FBI presented it to the FISA court when they asked to spy on Carter Page. They never mentioned any of the facts we just gave you. They hid them. That is lying. There is no other way to describe it. They've been busted lying, but they won't admit it. Former FBI Director Jim Comey took to Twitter today not to apologize for any of this or even to address the facts the memo raised, but to mock the release of the memo, like the aspiring MSNBC contributor he apparently is. Dishonest and misleading, he said. He didn't bother to explain how it was dishonest and misleading. Of course he didn't. Comey, who leaked his notes on private meetings with the president in a petty revenge move after being fired, is now declaring it beyond the pale somehow for Congress to carry out its constitutional duties of oversight of the FBI. Comey apparently views the FBI as a fourth co-equal branch of government, not subject to the authority of the other 3. Suddenly, a lot of people in Washington seem to agree with him. The current FBI director, for example, the one that Trump chose, Christopher Wray, he apparently argued that the names of FBI officials in the memo ought to be redacted, hidden from public view. Why? How exactly would that serve the public interest? It would not serve the public interest. It would protect the FBI. And as always, that was the point. All of this should make you nervous, the dishonesty mixed with self-righteousness. Looking back, you wonder how many people at the FBI ever even believed, just for a moment even, that Carter Page was actually a Russian agent. They clearly don't believe that now. If they did, Page would be in handcuffs. Yet he's still a free man, though his civil liberties have been violated and his reputation has been destroyed. Democrats could not care less. They're still pretending that somehow Carter Page hurt this country. They know that's a lie, but Page himself or what happens to him in the future is all irrelevant to them. If he can be used to destroy a president they hate, they are happy to use him, even if he is crushed in the process. And that may be the real lesson of this memo, and it's the reason we're spending an hour on it tonight. 10 years from now, Donald Trump will be gone, and Democrats will have forgotten that they once pretended to fear Russia as a threat to our democracy or whatever. But our law enforcement and intelligence agencies will remain as long as this country stays intact, and we have got to trust them. We give them incredible powers, awesome powers, including the power to take human life, the most basic of all. We allow them, by the way, to operate in secrecy because they tell us they must. In exchange for all of that, we ask them to operate with integrity, to prove to us that they haven't become tools of a political regime, because always and everywhere, that is the temptation. And unfortunately, it looks like it just happened here. Joe DeGenova is a former U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia. Tom Fitton is president of Judicial Watch. Both have been following this from the very beginning, and they both join us tonight. Joe, first to you, what jumps out of this memo now that we have it?
Andrew McCabe's testimony that but for the dossier, there would have been no application to the court for a warrant on crime.
So Democrats are saying on background, no one I don't think has come out and said it, but are saying that's not true, we never said that.
It's true. I've confirmed it with people who were in the room. But what it does show us is that everything we have suspected, and that was on the public record from the FISA court ruling and all of that, shows us that, in fact, senior DOJ and FBI officials not only lied to the American people, but they lied to a FISA court repeatedly over a number of months about what they knew to be false information and inadequate information being provided to a very secret court. It's a disgraceful period in the history of the department and the FBI, and James Comey and Loretta Lynch and all the people involved in this have performed disgracefully and unconstitutionally, which is even more important.
Tom Fitton, what jumps out at you?
The dossier is central to the Russia collusion theory targeting Trump, and that's the basis for the appointment of Robert Mueller. So you've got the corruption associated with the FISA surveillance, you've got the corruption associated with the FBI and DOJ working hand in glove with the Clinton campaign to push this narrative beginning in the summer of 2016, and it all led to the appointment of Robert Mueller. There is no Russia collusion story without the dossier, and we now know and have confirmed 6 ways to Sunday there was nothing behind it. So therefore, why is there a special counsel investigation?
That is a good question. So what would help a lot, I think, and would answer basic questions, would be the declassification of a number of subsequent documents, including at least part of McCabe's testimony before the House Intel Committee, but also at least parts of these FISA requests. Are we going to see those declassified?
Yes, I think probably eventually. What's interesting about this, you know, the Democrats were complaining that the release of this 4-page memo would compromise sources and methods. It would destroy the ability of the American intelligence community to collect intelligence. All of that is obviously nonsensical when you look at the memorandum. What is clear now as a result of the memorandum is that huge amounts of underlying intelligence have to be declassified and have to be shown to the American people so they can understand what Tom just described, that the FBI and the DOJ basically conspired with the Democratic Party, the DNC, and the Hillary Clinton campaign to exonerate her of violations of the Espionage Act, and in the course of trying to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president, to frame him for a non-existent crime of collusion.
You know, we just sued for the dossier or the underlying FISA documents today. So
have those ever been released in any previous case that you're aware of?
Sure, they've been released in the James Rosen case, where Mueller's FBI improperly targeted James Rosen, the Fox News correspondent.
Yes, and his parents.
Right, and then in the AP case. So there is precedent for the courts releasing this information. And, of course, the agencies can declassify it and ask the court to declassify it. You know, and what's also troubling is we were lied to just this week, because we were told by the FBI and Department of Justice, and evidently the President of the United States was told, the sky would fall if this information was released. There was no classified information in there, and there were no names that were released that would harm the FBI or DOJ interests. These were high-level officials who ordinarily would have been subject to public disclosure in discussions of public documents like this. Why was the department? Why were they trying to railroad President Trump into keeping this document secret?
Because they were protecting themselves.
And then it comes out and they're trying to say it's no big deal.
Right, or that you're unpatriotic for asking questions. So finally, Joe, this raises, I think, concerns for every American of all political postures about the behavior of the FBI. Are there any elected Democrats you know who are saying, you know, we should find out how our government is behaving?
No, and in fact, it's really quite sad. But it does now put the focus on Jeff Sessions and Rod Rosenstein. I have a lot of confidence in Jeff Sessions ultimately doing the right thing. I have very little confidence in Rod Rosenstein, no confidence in Chris Wray. We need a federal grand jury to investigate what the Bureau and the Department of Justice under Obama did to do what happened in this case. There are serious crimes that were committed by government officials. There needs to be a federal grand jury, and it needs to happen now.
Thank you both.
Welcome back. One final point before we go tonight. Happy Memo Day, the time of the year when the FBI sees their corrupt shadow and dives back into their hole for 6 weeks. Now, there is a lot of commentary floating around about the memo and its contents. Just so that you are fully informed about what we learned, here's what's in the actual memo. The infamous Trump dossier put together by former British spy Christopher Steele was, in fact, the justification used in order to obtain the original FISA court warrant to spy on Trump campaign official Carter Page. Then, the dossier was used as the reason to renew the FISA application to spy on Carter Page 3 additional times. Even worse than that, according to the memo, recently removed Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe testified that the FISA warrants would not have been sought at all without the information from the dossier. As if that is not bad enough, all of this happened on purpose. This dossier was used as the reason to spy on Trump advisor Carter Page because of lying and political corruption at the Department of Justice. According to the memo, top Department of Justice officials misrepresented the memo in their applications to the FISA court judge, just like Congressman Ted Yoho told this show last week. The fact that the dossier was an unverifiable load of salacious garbage put together as a political tool to try to take Trump down, the FISA court judge was not told about that part during the application process for the warrants on Carter Page. The lies that were told on the FISA application. Number one, the FISA judge was not told that Christopher Steele was a longtime FBI source paid over $160,000 by the DNC and Hillary Clinton's campaign to dig up derogatory ties on Trump and Russia. Number two, the application also didn't mention that Christopher Steele was paid by the FBI separately, but for the same information. Number three, the FBI had only barely begun to even try to corroborate the Steele dossier when it was used in the initial FISA application. Basically, the FBI was using the dossier as the primary reason to snoop on Carter Page without knowing whether or not it was true or entirely fabricated. Now, these warrants by law have to be renewed every 90 days, and each renewal requires separate findings of probable cause. Yet, each application, according to the memo, cites the Steele dossier. And now we're getting to the juicy parts where we name names. Guess who signed off on these warrants? Former FBI Director James Comey signed 3 of the warrants. Former Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe signed 1. Former Acting Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates, Acting Deputy Attorney General Dana Buente, and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein each signed 1. According to the memo, Department of Justice official Bruce Orr was Christopher Steele's man inside the Department of Justice. Remember Bruce Orr? The Department of Justice official who was demoted after it was revealed that he hid meetings with Fusion GPS and Christopher Steele. Well, guess what those meetings were about? Christopher Steele told Bruce Orr that he was, and I quote, desperate that Donald Trump not get elected and was passionate about him not being president. The FISA court was not told about that admission by Steele. And finally, we get to the media malfeasance. A Yahoo article was cited as corroboration of the information in the Steele dossier. Now, this was an outright lie because that article written by Michael Isikoff was based on information leaked to Isikoff by Steele himself. And then Christopher Steele lied to the FBI about his contact with the media, what he'd been leaking and to whom, in an effort to weaponize media outlets like Yahoo and Mother Jones and others to try to give the dossier credibility in the eyes of the public. When the FBI found out about that, they eventually fired him. So what does this mean? How do we end this? Is this the kind of corruption, political targeting, snooping, spying, and unjustified surveillance of American citizens by our own government that we the people will tolerate? It better not be. The crux of the matter here is the information in this memo is breathtaking. Our government used their surveillance powers to spy on a private citizen because they didn't like the politics of his boss. They used the power of the government to try to take down a presidential candidate. They used salacious gossip paid for by Hillary Clinton to try to take down Donald Trump. And they used our money, our tax money, and violated the sacred trust between our government and our people to do this. So stay tuned for what comes next. And that is my final point. You can reach me on Twitter at Liz_Wheeler. If you liked the show, please send me an email at oann.com/contact. In the meantime, catch us here tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern. And until then, have a good night.
Joining me right now with reaction, Harvard Law professor and the author of Trumped Up, Mr. Alan Dershowitz. Professor, good to see you. What do you think of it?
Thank you. Well, first, all we have is a memo, which is a secondary source telling us what's in the FISA application. It certainly constitutes what I would call probable cause to let us go further and see what was actually in the FISA memo. The Democrats say it presents an incomplete picture. Let the Democrats present a more complete picture. I think the American public is entitled to see the entire thing. That's why right from the beginning I called for a nonpartisan investigation into all of these issues, because this has become so partisan that we get one memo from the Republicans characterizing what the FISA application was like, and we're getting information from the Democrats saying, no, that's misleading, it was very different. We, the American public, are deprived of the objective truth by the constant clash of partisan narratives.
You're right. And I look at this and I say to myself, you know, if I'm writing a term paper, say in one of your classes, Professor, you know, I could be using the same books and sources as somebody else, and I could have one thesis and conclusion and back it up with my information I'm getting from those books, and somebody else could have a completely different thesis and conclusion. And so I want to see the books, the original books. I mean, I know that it's challenging because of national security concerns, but if they could redact a lot of that information so that we don't have to view this through some kind of political prism, I think that would go a long way, would it not?
I agree with you completely. And the other thing we've learned is that this memo, people were saying this memo, that the country would crumble and fall if this memo were released that has all kind of important national security content. I don't see it. I almost never see it. In 50 years of doing these kinds of cases, the claims of censorship, national security classification are almost always overblown. And when you see the actual document, go back to the Pentagon Papers. The government said the country wouldn't survive the release of the Pentagon Papers. We're doing quite well. And I think the same thing is true here. I suspect that we could see a lot of the actual FISA application. Some would have to be redacted, and it would not endanger national security. It would give us a better basis for deciding, as you said, it's reading the original book instead of the term paper on one side or the other side. These are hearsay. These are hearsay descriptions of what Republicans claim is in the application, and we're hearing hearsay descriptions of what the Democrats claim. We should see the real thing.
That said, what they're claiming isn't very good. It's kind of scary stuff. No. I mean, if this is the case, if somehow our FBI relied on opposition research to get a FISA warrant, what's that tell you about the state we're in?
The most important thing is not what's in it, it's what was left out. That they didn't tell, apparently didn't tell the FISA court who paid for, who commissioned the report on which the application was at least partially based. The court should have known that this was opposition research paid for by one political party to try to get dirt on another political party. I think the FISA court would take that information into account very seriously in deciding whether to grant the application or deny it.
You know, I've read the dossier. I don't know if you've read it. I don't necessarily encourage people to read it because it ain't pretty. But I'll tell you, Professor, that dossier reads like opposition research that's destined for a supermarket tabloid. I don't know how an intelligence officer or someone who had worked in intelligence would have ever written anything in that way, because it was so biased and it read like a piece of tabloid trash. I mean, is our FBI not smart enough to kind of say, yeah, this thing's a little dicey, you can just tell by the way it's written?
Well, and they should have told the FISA court about that and should have given an assessment of the credibility of the source, which they normally do. So I think there's a lot more that we have to learn about why certain things were included, why certain things were omitted, and whether or not the granting of the wiretap application really violated the Constitution. Or there's a Supreme Court case that says that if the court was willfully misled by the application, that the Fourth Amendment has been violated, and there's an exclusionary sanction that applies. So there's a lot more we have to learn. This is just the beginning of a much deeper inquiry that should be conducted by nonpartisan, objective experts representing the people of America, not one party of our two-party system. Yes, the 9/11 Commission, had real experts on it. and they didn't point fingers. They just came to conclusions about how we can prevent a recurrence. We need a commission looking into this to prevent recurrence of what happened in this last election. This last election does not make America proud on either side.
Mm-hmm. And as I keep saying, I guess Vladimir Putin got exactly what he wanted, because we've got a bit of a state of chaos right now.
I mean, I don't think he had a particular interest in who won the election. I think he generally tries to destabilize the United States of America, and he has succeeded in doing that. And we have shot ourselves in the foot by appointing a special counsel to look at criminal charges instead of appointing a nonpartisan commission to get information out in the open, transparency, so we can prevent Russia from, once again, trying to influence our elections. This should be a nonpartisan issue. All Americans should be deeply concerned about any efforts by Russia to influence any elections in this country or any other country.
Professor Alan Dershowitz, you know, I always appreciate your objectivity in this, because I know you're a Democrat and a Hillary Clinton supporter, but you're fair in this one, and our viewers appreciate it as well. Thank you so much. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Facebook, family, and friends. Are you kidding me? It has happened. Release the memo has taken place. How many of you feel vindicated? How many of you are just so excited that all the drama, all the negative backlash that you've been putting up with for months because of your support for Trump, how many of you feel so vindicated right now that this memo has come out and we see exactly what's really been going on in our government? Trump knew exactly what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was talking about. And this is a massive vindication in action. I'm not in my office, obviously. I'm doing a little bit of traveling today with my bride. But I wanted to bring you what I felt like was a very compelling and quick timeline of connecting some dots as to what's happened. Because this, if you put all these pieces together, folks, this is what's been taking place. You know, it starts from the beginning. The DNC rigged the nomination against Bernie Sanders, right? They took it from him. Yeah, I think there was pressure put on him besides the fact that they rigged it. But they wanted to make sure that Bernie was not going to be the primary candidate for the Democratic Party. They made sure that it was Hillary, all right? Then Obama's administration started to request surveillance on Trump. They wanted to find out what he's doing, what are his people doing. They wanted to try to make sure that there was no way they could lose the election, folks. They wanted to make sure there was no way. Aren't you glad you're a deplorable today? Because we made sure that they did lose. But this timeline, right? This timeline, they were requesting security on not only Trump, but on his transition team, on anybody that had to do with Trump. Then we have Donna Brazile. We can't forget what she did. It came out known fact. Hi, Sherry. It came out known fact that Donna Brazile gave the questions to Hillary ahead of time. They were setting this entire thing up. This was a slam dunk in their eyes, folks. This was absolutely a slam dunk in their eyes. They didn't think there was any way possible that Hillary was not going to win the nomination and win the presidency, and then they could clean all this up and they could keep it all from us. So then the DNC, they paid Christopher Steele to create a smear dossier about Trump. The mainstream media, they released a taped conversation about Trump talking about grabbing women. Again, all of this was so calculated to try to bring down the person that is now commander-in-chief of our country. They start the smear campaign. After all this, Trump still wins the general election. And you know, 19 days before Obama left office is when Obama came out and he actually expanded Executive Order 12333 to allow more agencies to have access to security data. He knew exactly what he was doing before he left office. 19 days. This goes all the way to the top, folks. This goes all the way to the top. There is no way Obama and Hillary are going to get out of this unscathed. There is no possible way. Is anybody else out there thankful for our man Donald Trump having the courage? I mean, it takes courage to give the American people the truth. And remember, there's no way we would have had the truth had Hillary been elected. It would have been business as usual, except it would have been pedal to the metal for the Democrat elite politicians to continue to do what they wanted to do and how they wanted to do it. The Democrat Party comes up with scandal that Trump colludes with Russia. We got to add that in there because, again, they still have to do what they can to try to get this man that shouldn't have won the election out. So they came up with this Russia story, even though there was no proof. They have the entire propaganda machine known as the mainstream media at their beck and call. All of the mainstream medias are all blasting Trump negative, Trump collusion, Trump collusion. Over 90% of everything that's been on the TV, on the main news outlets, was negative about Trump and pointing to some type of Russian collusion. Are you feeling vindicated today? Are you feeling vindicated today? Thank God that we've got people out there like you and I that push through and don't listen to the status quo and just don't take no for an answer. We see through the bullcrap, we've seen through the lies, and that's what opened this entire thing up. So we've got the media that's pushing this fake Russian narrative, this wild claim backed up by the media. Obama holdovers starts unmasking Trump's transition team. We can't forget that. It was a strategic plan to try to unmask, to try to find anything. You know, that's the other thing that we can't forget about, is that Trump's entire transition team was unmasked. If there was any kind of dirt at all going on, they would have found it, and they would have made sure that the mainstream media had something to run with, but they couldn't find anything. They had to keep making stuff up. They had to keep making stuff up so that they could try to say that there's something negative about Trump. That just shows how clean our boy is. That shows how clean our boy and his transition team is. He has been amazing in there. So we've got his transition team is unmasked. They released classified information against our man, against his team. There was leaks. They're leaking stuff. They were desperate. We've got the DNC and Obama administration colluding with the intelligence community to thwart Trump's campaign efforts. All this Russia collusion was an attempt to cover up the fact that the Obama administration and the intelligence community, along with the DNC and the mainstream media, were trying to get Hillary Clinton elected. You know what, folks? It's still just the beginning. Heads are going to roll from this. There is no way that Hillary, that Comey, that Obama are going to get out of this alive. We are literally in the middle of history in the making. People are going to look back at this time, at this era of our United States, and they're going to say, wow, look at the courage for those people that supported that president when all of the media was biased, when all of the media and the celebrities, all the actors, all the backlash that's happened that we, the American people, have felt and fought and had to fight through to continue to support our man Donald Trump. They're going to look back at this time in history and they're going to say, wow, what courage those people had. It's like a revolution. Can you feel it? It's a revolution that is taking place inside our country. From the top down, we're being cleaned out head to toe. The swamp is being drained. And we are going to be a brand new United States. We're going to be better than ever. We're going to be clean of all these crooked cronies, all these political elites, and especially the global elites that want to make the United States cower to their whims. We are coming out of that. This is bigger than Watergate. This is the biggest thing that's happened in the history of our country. So yeah, I'm glad and thankful that Donald Trump kept Gitmo open. Maybe that's why he kept it open. Maybe he said Guantanamo Bay's got to stay open because we got some people that we're lining up to throw in that place. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. If you haven't gone to my website, check my website, davidharrisjr.com. Check out the articles that are on there. Share those articles. If you'd like to support me, share those articles. Click on some of the links. That let my advertisers know that I got people on there. But yes, we're going to have, I've got my researchers, my journalists, my investigative journalists that are on this. They are going to bring us the truth. They're going to bring us cutting information as soon as it comes out. And I want you to be informed with no nonsense news. So if you want to support that, check out my website. Click on some of those links. That's a great way to support me. And yeah, something is going to happen, folks. Heads are rolling. There's no way they're going to get out of this alive. So God bless you. I just wanted to hop on really quick today. Thank you so much. Check out that video I posted this morning on Maxine Waters. That thing's going crazy. That woman needs to be put in her place. I tried to do that with that video. She's a bold-faced liar. She's the Negro that's still on the plantation because she feels like it's her plantation, and she's trying to keep as many other Negroes there as possible, and I'm sounding the alarm on that. She needs to hear that message, and you can help her hear that message if you share that video. So if you haven't watched it yet or shared it yet, make sure you check out that video. She's part of the swamp, and the swamp needs to be drained.